I'm Jennifer Rodriguez. This is for Dr. Kingston's EDU 5315 summer 2016 class. I have been on the baseball field all day, so I apologize that I look a hot mess. My presentation was over differentiation instruction, addressing the needs of gifted students and struggling students. I want to start with the definition of differentiation. When I think of that as an educator, I think of just changing the way that you do things. You're tailoring the instruction to meet the needs of all of your students. You are finding out what makes them successful, and you are doing that. You're observing and understanding their academic abilities. So you're getting to know your students, basically. You not only look at the differences that they have in their learning, but you look at the similarities as well. You provide students different avenues of learning. So you would make sure that you're really watching what they're doing, and you have that ear for knowing whether or not they're understanding what is going on. Differentiation can also be looked at as multi-leveled instruction. So you're doing all of these things to make sure that you're meeting the needs of your students. There was a wonderful quote in my presentation, and I'm going to look at it and read it because I can't remember it, but it's from Diane Heacox. It's a book called Making Differentiation a Habit. It says, when teachers effectively differentiate instruction, there is a continuous flow in the processes of teaching, learning, and assessment. These components operate not as steps that we follow, but rather as a continuous cycle, each process informing the next. So to me, that means there is no step-by-step direction and no step-by-step way to teach these kids. We have to build upon what we're getting back from them, their feedback. And that may not be verbal feedback. That's going to be how they're performing. Why do teachers differentiate instruction? Well, we need to respond to the needs of all of our learners. All of our learners are going to have different learning styles. We need to be able to respond to that. Our content and our delivery and our process has to be key. We have to respond actively to those particular students or a group of students. So this differentiation might be based on an individual learner. It may be a flexible grouping style. I know that in my guided math class, for the first few weeks of school, I am teaching whole group, guided practice, independent practice, show me what you know. And then I transition into a whole group mini lesson, and then bam, we're doing small group instruction. And I teach the same thing 10 times a day because I do it 5 times with each set of classes that I have, and I have 2 sets. We need to remember that not all students learn the same. We're all different. We all learn differently. Thank goodness for that. We also, when we're differentiating, we need to provide a variety of ways for students to master these concepts. So it's not a one-size-fits-all world out there, especially not in a school building. We need to make sure that we're providing the students with different ways and how to show us that they're understanding what we're saying. Our learning environment has to be flexible. We have to be okay with, and our kids have to know that it's okay to fail sometimes. It's okay to say the wrong answer. That learning environment has to support an individual learning environment as well as a group, flexible group work. So sometimes we may work independently. Sometimes we may work in groups of 2, 4, 3. Sometimes you may be sitting at my back table. Of course, as normal, our environment needs to be safe and supportive, and we need to allow student preference every once in a while. I always joke, kind of by the end of the year, my kids start to notice that they have been the ones at my back table all the time. My struggling kids. So they're always like, oh, we're always with you first, Miss Rodriguez. Why can't we be over there first, or at computers first, or on the iPads first? They start to pick up on that. So it is okay to change your groups every once in a while. For goodness sake, just do it. We're meeting the needs of all of them. And as long as you're doing that, if you need to switch it up a little to throw them off, do it. Okay, in this part of my presentation, I provided a video about differentiation. It's very informative. It's about a school in Mesquite. It's focused on an elementary classroom, a teacher who is amazing. at verbalizing how she differentiates in her classroom. So I did plug in one of my reflective questions as well. Why is it important for classroom teachers to differentiate instruction? I want you to focus on that. My principal called me in the other day and sat me down and asked me to, or I'm sorry, not sat me down, but called me in and asked me if I wanted to interview prospective science teachers with her. And I thought, well, sure. I don't know what I'm going to ask. I don't know what she's going to ask. I don't know what to expect, but I'm there. So one of the questions was, how do you differentiate? Tell me the ways you differentiate in your classroom. So that is why that is one of my reflective questions. We want to know how teachers differentiate. So once we've assessed our students, our plans are intentional. We are planning to meet their needs. So we're planning to whatever they did not get that came out of our mouth. We're adjusting those lessons as well to meet the needs of those students. Again, our classroom is flexible. And as we're differentiating the instruction, whether this is through independent learning or group learning, we're constantly assessing the needs of those students. So we're constantly keeping documentation as to whether or not they're getting it. We're constantly testing them, whether that be formally or informally. We constantly know where they are. A lot of the research in this, a lot of the content in this research that I came up with really focused on the content, the process, and the products of differentiation. So the content is how the teacher plans on making the learning engaging. So what types of things are you going to be doing to help aid in their understanding? And this is what the student is learning. Our process is how the learner is going to make sense of that learning. So how are they making those connections to other things? So they're kind of scaffolding. They just don't know that they're scaffolding. This is how they're making sense of their learning. And the products, how is the student going to show that they understand? What are they going to give me to make me aware that they got it, that we can check that box and move on? You have to give the students multiple opportunities to show you that they have an understanding of the content. So what might work for Chloe may not be sufficient enough for Jared. So you have to keep in mind that you are teaching to their needs. So they might not be able to produce the same things as everyone else, but there's still a way for them to show you how they're mastering. And the affect. This is the synergy between the student's thoughts and emotions. Again, how are they making those connections, and how are you making sure that those connections are going to be remembered? We can't just, relate fractions to a slice of pie that your grandma made at Thanksgiving, and this is why we do it. We have to help them see well enough to where they start making those connections on their own with, baking with their mother, or splitting a candy bar with their little sister, or things like that. We have to know that the thoughts and emotions connected with that content go beyond the lesson. Again, the learning environment. So we're going to focus on gifted learners now. So we're accommodating for the gifted learners. So we encourage their independent learning. These gifted students can explore in depth without you even prompting them to do so. They need to be exploring in different points of view, and you need to hold them accountable for their learning. Sometimes our gifted students are not our most responsible students. So you need to make sure that there's an agreement between you, and that they know the expectations that are set forth. You're also going to be asking them higher level questions. So don't tell them what to do exactly, but let them take charge of that lesson or activity. You do need to be the facilitator, but let them be creative and productive. So this can either be with small group work or individual, but let it be the student's choice. When you're exploring in depth, just make sure that you're focusing more on the fast-paced content and not the basics. Our gifted learners do not need more of the basics. They need things that are going to build upon their prior knowledge and build upon their learning process. That will in turn create the higher level thinking. Explore different points of view. So this might be peer teaching and collaborative group work. I love to have my students teach lessons. I think that a lot of our gifted learners love to do this. If there's time and we can squeeze that in, that's what we need to be doing. Most of the time, our gifted learners need to be doing things that are inquiry-based, open-ended, and are going to catch their attention. So they're interest-based as well. Hold them accountable for their learning. To me, this is not just gifted learners. This is all learners. We need to guide them, but still give them choices. We need to give them various options, but also let them present the information and just have that student-teacher agreement. Let them know the expectations are there. Let them rise to those expectations. And if they don't, they need to complete the work according to the specifications, no matter what. Accommodating the struggling learner. So change and switch around what students learn. If this doesn't work, try something new. If teaching them how to multiply using their fingers doesn't work, then teach them the songs. Math is what is my language. So I teach tips and tricks for my struggling learners. Map out their thoughts and ideas. Scaffold. Build upon their prior knowledge. So break that learning into chunks. Let them relate that to something that they've learned before and allow them to move toward a clear goal. Okay. Sometimes they're just not going to get it at first. It's going to take 1, 2, 3, and 4, maybe even sending them next door to hear it from the other teacher. But we need to be forming those bridges between what students already know and what we want them to know. Okay, right here I inserted my reflection question number 2. So if we are assessing each student based on their individual learning style and needs, how do we make sure we are differentiating instruction to meet those needs? So yeah, we know that we need to assess our students' individual learning style and differentiate. How do we know that we're doing that sufficiently? Is what that question is asking. Again, here's another video between this one and the other one that was probably about 6 minutes or so out of my presentation. But top 10 tips for differentiated instruction. So get to know your students. Keep a folder for them. At the beginning of every year, I put their names on a sticky note, on a label, put that label on a folder. I put everything from informal assessments to copies of nurse notes to copies of PE passes, discipline-wise, behavior-wise. Get to know them. Send home an inventory at the beginning of the year. Your child's strengths and weaknesses is what mine's called. I give it to parents. I require that they bring it back to me by the end of the first school week, and I keep that in there. Focus on important concepts and skills. This is very self-explanatory. Follow the IFD. Teach what the state of Texas wants you to teach. Create a wonderful classroom environment. Be loving. Be loving. The first week of school, in my eyes, is the time to build relationships. To me, sometimes it's, who cares if they learn this week? Let's get them to trust me because they're not going to do anything for me until they do that. Use flexible grouping. So sometimes you might have the same groups for weeks and weeks and weeks, but other times switch it around a little. Like I said, my kids notice when they're the first group to come to me. They're quick to say, Ms. Rodriguez, you always have us first. Well, that's how it has to be. So maybe some days use it based on ability and other days use it just interest-based. Teach the individual students' learning styles. Again, that goes hand in hand with differentiation. You have to know where your kids are. You have to assess to know where they are. And adjust questions. This can even include adjusting your wait time. Okay? A lot of my kids are very shy. They don't want to answer because they think that they're going to be wrong. And I tell them, from the beginning, if you don't know, say something. If you say something and you're wrong, who cares? We all say stuff and we're all, we can all be wrong. Take your time and have a good attitude. I love this quote that says the best teachers teach from the heart, not from the book. That's when you have to love your kids first before you can teach them. So I always tease my kids and tell them that at the end of every year, I don't want to let go of my kids. And at the beginning of the year, you think, oh, I miss my kids from last year. How am I ever going to love these kids like I loved the last ones? Oh, it's going to be a long year. And then by the end of the year, you don't want to let them go. So be that teacher that cares enough to be there for them and to be who you need to be in order to change how you teach for them. Thank you.